Today, I'm going to talk about unexpected loss and its estimation. So, what is unexpected loss? In my previous video, I talked about expected loss. Expected loss is the average credit loss that we would expect from an exposure or portfolio over a given period of time. You can view my previous video to see how we calculate expected loss. The unexpected loss is the average total loss over and above the mean loss. It is calculated as a standard deviation from the mean at a certain confidence level. We can see this part is expected loss. Above that is the unexpected loss, and it was calculated with certain confidence level. And beyond expected loss and unexpected loss, we have economic capital and regulatory capital. So let's see, what is economic capital? Economic capital is a measure of risk in terms of capital. It is the amount of the capital that a company needs to ensure that it stays solvent given its risk profile. So usually the economic capital is calculated internally by the company. Then what is regulatory capital? Regulatory capital is similar to economic capital, but it is required by the financial regulator. For example, in the US, the financial regulator maybe it is the Fed. Also in this talk, I'm going to use Bernoulli distribution. Bernoulli distribution is a discrete probability distribution with only two possibilities. One is success, one is failure. Usually, Bernoulli distribution is used for the credit risk. Either the company survive or the company default. And the variance of a Bernoulli distribution is calculated by the P times 1 minus P. The P is the probability of survive. Now, let's check how we calculate unexpected loss. In my previous video, I talked about the calculation of expected loss. The formula is exposure at default times probability of default times loss given default. For the unexpected loss, I use this paper. This paper was published on International Journal of Economics. According to this paper, unexpected loss can be calculated with this formula. Let me simplify this formula a little bit. In our special case, unexpected loss can be calculated by EAD times square root of this item. It is LGD squared times variance of probability of default plus probability of default times variance of LGD. From previous video, we know EAD, we know LGD, and also we know PD. Now the questions are how we calculate variance for PD and LGD. The probability of default has a Bernoulli distribution. Then the variance of PD can be calculated by PD times 1 minus PD. And loss given default has a beta distribution in our example. So the variance LGD can be calculated by LGD times 1 minus LGD divided by 4. If we go back to the previous paper, we can see the authors had the same statement with what I said. The Bernoulli distribution, the variance can be calculated by PD times 1 minus PD, and also because LGD has a beta distribution, and we can replace the variance LGD by this item. Okay, now we got all the variables we need for the calculation. Let's go to the Excel spreadsheet. In my previous video, I showed you how to calculate PD, how to calculate LGD, how to calculate EAD. Now, let's use all the variables to calculate unexpected loss. First, let's calculate variance of PD, which equal to PD times 1 minus PD. And then let's calculate variance of LGD, which equal to LGD times 1 minus LGD divided by 4. And finally, unexpected loss will equal to, with the formula I showed you before, it has a value about $175 million. And if we check the expected loss we calculated before, it was $71 million. So the unexpected loss is about $100 million more than expected loss in this example. This is how I calculated unexpected loss for one asset. Of course, in the real world, you will have multiple assets, and maybe you'll have multiple portfolio to calculate, and then the calculation will become more complicated. But the basic principle remains the same. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my channel. If you want to know other financial risk management topics, please let me know.